Hello, welcome to episode 3 of Spiritual Kink. This is where Alex and myself, two friends who just happen to have left their corporate jobs to pursue their deeper soul missions. And we're on a wild journey down the cosmic rabbit hole of our greater existence. And we decided to create this random series on YouTube after hours and hours of us having spiritual and philosophical conversations on WhatsApp and Instagram. And we realized that, hey, it might be fun to share these conversations in the YouTube space for like all 5 people who view these. So here we are. And as two Scorpios do, we're calling this space Spiritual Kink because why not? And you know, you like it. All right. So let's get started. Today, we've got a couple of topics that we're going to dive into. This is going to be a bit of a shorter episode, sadly, but I could talk to Alex for hours. We're going to talk a little bit about the Sirian Star Council, the Arcturian Council of Light, about some of the heaviness that we've been seeing collectively that people are working through. And if we have time, we might talk about this upcoming full moon, the astrological new year, and yeah. So Alex, I'll toss it over to you. Where should we begin?
Oh gosh. Well, I guess let's dig right in. We were saying we were going to share about our little guide councils that we channel. So I think maybe starting with what the fuck is channeling?
What is channeling? I know I was on my walk today and I was thinking about how I think some people perceive channeling as like, okay, something's going to take over my body or my hand's just going to start moving on its own. You know, you see in movies, like, especially like old school, like spiritualism and like the seances and all the stuff they used to do, like towards like after the American Civil War, like that period of time, all that stuff. Um, and I used to think that, but it's so much more subtle than that, right? Like it's nothing's gonna like take over your hand, nothing's gonna hopefully take over your body.
Yeah.
You're really connecting with like an energy signal. Like, how would you describe it? That's what I think of as like connecting with an energy.
Yeah, it's definitely not like an exorcism. I feel like a lot of people think of it as like an exorcism of like like
Yeah.
speaking in tongues. And I do realize some spiritual churches are or spiritualistic churches, I forgot what the term is. They do speak in tongues, and I'm not saying that's not a thing. It's just I think the kind of channeling we're talking about, you're right. It's not like I'm being possessed by spirit and, channeling that way. Although when I first started getting messages, I wasn't able to like fully control when it was going to happen. And you know that, like the lack of sleep I've experienced,
Mhm.
I've gotten better at it. Or even when I first arrived in Argentina, like my second week here, I was in the car with a friend getting driven home at night, and I couldn't even focus because I had so much audio coming in, and like my third eye felt so much pressure in it. But I've gotten better. Now it's more, there are different ways of channeling. I know you live channel verbally, and you show that on your Instagram. Anyone who hasn't seen her do this, you need to tune into those. It's so cool. I love watching them. And for me, I do channel writing, which is I sit down, I ask to connect to a specific group or whoever in my guidance circle is wanting to speak, and I start writing. And within 10 minutes, I'll have 3 to 6 pages of very intense information. So, how do you
Yeah.
channel though outside of the live channelings you do? How's it for you?
Yeah. Well, I didn't start channeling verbally, and I don't normally channel verbally anymore because it's just not, as and projectors speak, it's just not efficient for me. I don't remember everything I say, and I don't want to record myself and listen back. I'd rather just have like a journal or a body of work that I can go back and reference. So the vast majority of my channeling is written like yours because it's to the point now where I literally have like 4 different journals. And depending on which guide or group I'm working with, that's what journal I'm working out of. Because I had so many different things that came through. And what I'm learning now is really through my guides. Like I'm getting so much information from them. And I work with two main groups right now. And so I don't want that to be lost, you know, like when I channeled a lot, I would just be writing the same journal. Then I would finish pages in that and go to a new one. But then I couldn't go back and reference it. So, or like come back, or I couldn't find what I needed all the time. But
Yeah.
yeah, the writing has been the thing that I use the most. And then over time, I started realizing that I could channel verbally, and that's been fun. But I feel like the writing is way easier, and I feel like I can get more. Well, it's just different. Like when you,
Yeah.
the other thing too, I think that's you probably experience as well is that when you're channeling, you're not always just getting words. It's like receiving a packet of information. Like you can feel things, see things, you can see visions while you're also channeling. So it can be very dynamic. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's literally just writing things out. Um, but it can be very dynamic. And so it can be sometimes hard to really um, verbalize or like share everything because sometimes words just like don't encompass all of the dynamic information that you're receiving.
I totally agree. It's like I get shown a lot of visuals too. I remember when you did a reading for me somewhat recently, like my guide Anubis kept showing you like weird map diagrams, and you're like, I don't really get this. I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen this so many times. So sometimes when I'm channel writing, I'm like, gosh, should I start drawing or diagramming? But then I also feel like me putting it on paper would be like me drawing stick figures in comparison to like the
Yes.
vastness of understanding outside of the visual I'm seeing. I can't capture it in this like, three-dimensional like whatever. Um, the other way I've channeled, and I don't really, those are channels I don't really share. I consider them like channels for my own growth and information, is like when I'm dancing. Like I do a lot of full body channeling where it's almost like I'm studying, but if you were to watch me, I just look like a sober but looking like a drugged up freak, like weird air humping, dancing, tantric, whatever. So yeah, that's another way I channel, but that's something I don't share because it's personal usually.
Yeah. Like, do you feel like you're receiving information or like internal, like sort of like activations, or like what is there like a difference in when you use like a different modality, I guess you could say, in channeling? Do you receive information differently when you think of like written versus dancing?
Yeah, when I write, it's almost like they're giving me instructions for other humans to learn from and feel inspiration and guidance, or a textbook of it's a part of the channels I've written from the Sirian Star Council lately. It seems like a textbook on like astrophysics and energy work of how they actually would write a textbook on how would you tune someone's energy the way that I do it with the DNA light energy weaving. When I'm dancing, it could be different things like activating codes within myself that I get to pull in. So the dancing is like me moving, but also doing energy weaving, which for those of you that have never talked to me about that or had a session with me, I move my hands the whole time, even though I work by myself. So it's almost like sometimes it's me tuning my house too. Like I'll be in this room
Mhm.
dancing and I'm like, oh, I'm clearing something. Or sometimes I feel guided to move a certain way because they're teaching me a weaving method almost. So I feel like when I dance, it's a lot of things that require the kinesthetics of movement. Whereas when I write, it's just very like academic almost of the
Yeah.
information I'm getting.
Yeah. That's really interesting. No, I feel that. And it's interesting too. And I guess we'll talk about this next, but we thought when we were talking before we pressed record that it would be fun to talk about what it's like to channel different groups and how the information might be different or similar. Because even for the different groups that I work with, the way I even receive information from them is different. So I right now work with the Arcturian Light Council, and then I work with a specific group of the Akasha, or I mean, I consider the Akasha also Pleiadians, but I'm working with a specific group with them, and the way that I receive information from the Arcturians is very different than the way that I receive information from the Akasha. And not even content wise, literally the way that the energy is channeled through me is very different. I have a like with the Akasha, I feel like it's more stream of consciousness. Like if I don't catch it, I lose it. Whereas with the Arcturians, it's like a ball of information and it sits like in my field and I'm just sort of pulling it. And then somebody could call and I could get on the phone and I'll pause up there and get on the phone. I can talk, blah, 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 go back, send my awareness back up, catch, and like keep moving
That's so
on.
cool.
So to me, it feels like it's information they've sent to me, not that they're doing in like constantly right now. They're like, and sometimes even when and we'll talk about it in a second, but so it feels, yes, the content of what both groups share with me is different and they share it in their own ways. Like they definitely have different characteristics that they share in their own ways, but how they share channeled information is also different. So just to share this sort of two nuances of like more of this like ball of information that sits in my field and then I sort of like start to untangle. And then the Akasha, it's more like the stream of consciousness information. Like I'm literally having a conversation with some friends, if you know, in that sort of way. And there are times where I've actually like had to put a line across a line of paper because I lost what they thought and I just had to like keep going and move on. So that's different. But how do the Sirian Star Council, how do they communicate with you?
They just start talking and it's like it's they'll start talking and I'm writing. I'm literally I'm like the what are the stenographers in court that like do the live
Yeah.
notes on like that's what I feel like. And so I'm just like writing the whole time. If I stop and start reading what I'm writing before they're finished, they will go, "Okay, well you're not tuned in. Like we'll do this another time." They're very much like we are talking and you are here with us and if you want to get distracted, that's fine. We'll pick up another time and it's not going to be in 5 minutes. It'll be in like a week, you know? And so they're very much like, are you here? Are you with us, Alex? Good. This is what you get right now. And I don't stop writing and all of a sudden they're just finished. And then I go back and reread and I'm usually not even aware of all this stuff they just said
Uh-huh.
until I reread and I'm like, oh my, whoa, all right, we got some meaty content here. So that's been really cool. The energy though with them, it's very light, even though it's very academic, kind of deep semantic like word choices. Uh, their energy is very light of like, yeah, this is fun, isn't it? To just get super geeky about this energy technology.
So fun.
Um, when I channel Anubis, I could channel right with him. He also comes in when I dance. It just, I can kind of choose with him. He's very like, it's a very short message, super powerful usually, and then he's like done. And then he might show me some things when I'm dancing that is more related to my body or weaving techniques. I would say the most intense guide I've channeled that just gives deep physical sensations is Lilith. Like Lilith has
Mhm.
stopped me in my tracks hiking before in Texas when I was there. I had like an out of body experience with her that realistically I think was less than a minute of me just being frozen in the woods somewhere and then tuning back in and going, whoa, that was intense. But she'll show up visually like in a gorgeous gown and like dramatic lighting. I mean, she's like if she shows up, she's showing up fully made up, her hair done and whatever. But she's the most dramatic I've channeled for sure.
I love that. I love that. That's so cool. Yeah, I know. It's funny. I feel like most of the time when I've channeled, it's and that's why I think it's fun. And why you and I were talking about this is like we channel different groups of different beings, stuff like that. Like when I've been channeling, it's and it's just funny because like sometimes like of course like channel like I've channeled like Christ consciousness,
Oh,
um,
cool.
different guides when I couldn't figure out who they were, um and trying to like understand that, and then getting into the nuances of okay, well, how do I know this is a different, because at a period of time like I couldn't be like in the beginning I couldn't be like, oh well, that's Bridget, or oh that's Isis, or oh that's like, so I want people to know that like this is a gift that like grows and evolves over time. It's not like we just like
Yeah.
woke up one day and we're like, I can do all this stuff. Like the more you work with it, the more you grow. The more inner work you do, the more you can expand into these higher aspects. So, and some people, it's easier for the, it's a spectrum. So, yeah. So I was practicing, like trying to have them, same thing with like channeling Archangel Michael. I've started working with Archangel Uriel lately too. But it's funny because like you have, like I feel like I worked with a lot of sort of like galactic groups or
Angelic.
angelics, like stuff like that. And then you're like, I look fucking Anubis, which I say that because when I was channeling him for you, when I was doing your reading, I was like, he's like Metatron, or is it Megatron,
Megatron.
like
Yeah.
Megatron, because there is a Metatron who is also an angel, but Megatron. I was like, he sounds like Megatron, Alex. Like, what is happening? This is crazy. And he was like kind of annoyed with me because I'm kind of like I laugh, and he's like, "This is serious. We're talking about this right now. Like, stop laughing." And I'm like, "I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm so uncomfortable." Not in like a bad way, but being like, "Ah."
Yeah,
But that's what.
I do
Oh,
think my
God.
guides are historically like it's a lot of what people consider with death and hell and like dark
Yeah.
things. And yes, they are dark, but not in a bad way. Like I keep saying, I think I've said it before on an episode with you, but it's like darkness isn't necessarily bad. You need it just as much as you need light to balance yin and yang. But yeah, my guides, I mean, I've channeled years ago before I realized I was channeling, I was definitely talking to Hades. So I'm like, oh, here's my trend, just the dudes of the underworld, it's just whatever. Or Persephone for a while early on in my journey. And Lilith, is often associated with sin or female sin or um I like my guides. I think they match my vibe a little bit, but it's funny because when I think of you and I always think of an Oreo cookie. Like you're like the all this like light ethereal stuff, and then I'm like, yeah, darkness. Although you started, pulling in Kali too within the
Mhm.
last couple months, which was so badass and amazing to watch as your friend. It was awesome.
Yeah, she fucked me up. Not really. But when I was that time when I like fully seized up in breath work, and I was like, okay, Kali, like I'm ready to release. And then I went into like a full body seizure and was in like so much pain and all this stuff. And I was like, Kali. And she just like looked at me like laughing, just being like, you wanted this. Here we
Yeah.
are. This is what I'm
Yeah.
here for. I'm like, you're right. You're right. I wanted it. I wanted it.
The
Speaking
guide,
of spirits, I think.
I like that we both started pulling in more Hindu slash Indian culture kind of guides as well. Like for me, that one of the newest ones is Basuki, who's like I had to read up on it, and I thank my friend Kanchana for giving this guide a name because I would have never figured it out with the lack of like cultural knowledge too. But Vasuki is like one of the like snake lords, I'll call them. There's several layers of them. So now it's like when I'm dancing, I mean, I told you a couple months ago I was like channeling cobra type movements while
Mhm.
dancing, and then finally I was like, ah, it's because I literally got like a dude with like a bunch of cobras over his head working with me, and like you said, we don't always know who's coming in. It takes a while. I The analogy I use is like it's like we have a frequency radio dial and we're trying to like tune it so we don't get the static around it and we start to figure out who it is that's coming in.
Mhm.
Um, And the other thing I just want to throw out there for anyone, from one of the 2, 3, 4, 5 people watching, if it's something you want to start doing, I do want to caution, I think we say it every episode we've done so far, it's like you're going to channel from the vibration that you're at and for what you're ready for. And I really, not to make this a fear-based thing, but if you are at a point where you haven't done the work for yourself yet, where you haven't started addressing your own inner demons and traumas and started clearing it, you could start channeling something or someone that doesn't have the best intentions because they're vibrating the way you're vibrating, and that's what you're going to pull in. And so instead of listening to Lindsay and I talk about this and thinking, oh, I want to do that so badly, detach from that a little bit, remain curious, but focus back on what's a priority for you. It's all, the answer is 99% of the time it's going to be do your inner work, and the
Yeah.
rest will come. So
Yeah. No, that's so important because, it's like, how grounded are you when you channel? What is your process? How clear is your channel? How clear is your field? What are your boundaries like? Do you have a pattern in your life that you're not good at setting boundaries? Well, if that's the case, then then that may be something to look at because you're not setting yourself up to be the strongest channel. And I teach all of these things. I think it's really good to have a very clear understanding and a good foundation before you start diving into things that you don't know about. It doesn't have to be that way, but I know that's what I needed, and so that's what I offer to clients because I'm such a big proponent of like approaching things from a very like grounded and ethical place. Alex and I also have like backgrounds in research, and so while we do this spiritual work, we also came from the corporate world. Like we understand like coming from a place of being grounded. So if you are interested in channeling, like, and you don't feel like you know what to do or you need support, like reach out. Like don't go in this alone because the other thing too is, if you ask for anything, you'll get anything. If you open yourself up to everything, then you get everything. And we live in a world, and maybe this is a topic for another time. I can't fully wrap my brain around people who ignore the fact that, they're like, I only live in the light. I only experience the light. Da, da, da. And I'm like, but you literally incarnated into a world of contrast. And so logically speaking, that means that there is duality here. So there isn't only light, and you were saying earlier, you can't even know the light if you don't understand your darkness. That's why the shadow work and the clearing is so important, because if you can't go into those deeper, darker spaces of yourself and integrate those, you can't evolve, you can't ascend, you can't access higher frequency. It's not possible. So I am always confused when I hear, especially people in the spiritual space, completely dismissing the idea of darkness or that space. Because again, like there is nothing wrong with the darkness. You cannot know the light without understanding the darkness, your darkness, our darkness, as a collective. Like it's,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of my favorite things about doing like the DNA light energy weaving work I do and energy clearings, things like that, is like I like seeing the symbolism that shows up in different people of their darkness. Like for me, and I know it's different for different light workers, but for me it's like I I am shown people's darkness in the form of very shiny black animals oftentimes. It could be leeches, it could be gorillas, it could be pumas, like panthers, whatever, snakes. And to me, animal spiritual symbolism is so important when I do that work. But I also just like I get a kick out of it. I was like, you got like a panther inside you, like that. How cool is that? And and a lot of people are like, oh, that's scary. And I'm like, then you're not ready, right? Like because it isn't scary. It's literally a unique blueprint of that person's darkness being shown so we can work with it, so we can start looking at it more deeply together. But yeah, Darkness without light. We could probably talk about that for 6 episodes in a row.
I know.
I have well, since we were talking about channeling, I have two channel writings from the Sirian Star Council where they break down like how to attune energy. They give me an analogy called the Hall of Mirrors, that humans are just a bunch of little mirrors you can tilt to move the light in different ways to attune them. And then they started the second channel, they explained to me the significance of voids and that humans create voids all the time and aren't aware of it. And so that is a tool to use darkness to propel light forward, according to the council. And it's stuff like that where I'm like, see, you can't do the light stuff without the dark stuff. And so I get
Yeah.
equally annoyed or disappointed when I see people being like, love and light only, blah, blah, blah.
I'm like, ugh. No, well, and you that's what I feel like sometimes too. Like if I have one-on-one clients and I'm like coaching them or whatever through stuff, they get really uncomfortable when we hit blocks or we hit pain points or we hit triggers or they apologize. They're like, oh my gosh, like I just feel like this is like just too much and I'm sorry for putting this, whatever. And I'm like, no. You cannot transform or alchemize anything. You can't go from light to light. I'm sorry. Like even for me, like you and I were just talking before this, like in December, a little bit November, but major December, like we were deep in our shit, like going through some like heavy, heavy shadow work and just like in a really tough place. That doesn't mean I went backwards. That's actually because I'm going forwards, because things are evolving, because there's more clarity on the other side of the dark night of the soul that you need to go through. You can't transform, you can't elevate because you just like say like, okay, well, one good thing to the next, or what. It's like, no, like you have to go within, you have to integrate aspects of yourself, you have to clear things that no longer in alignment. I mean, there's just so many things, and you have to like be uncomfortable if things are not. I always say like when things are really uncomfortable, when somebody pinpoints something that you're like, I don't think I can transmute that. I don't think I can heal that. That is the thing you're here to heal. That is the
Yes.
pain, the frustration, the uncomfortableness. If you're never uncomfortable, then you're never growing. And that is literally athletes say that, like personal trainers say that. We literally say that about the physical body, but that is also about the energy body as well and our soul.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also, I use the analogy of like an onion when it comes to healing. It's like, because sometimes, and same for me, I think for everyone, it's like you might, let's say you have some childhood trauma, right? You address it, and 5 years later, you feel like you finished it, right? And all of a sudden, something much deeper related back to that thing pops up for you to heal. And people are like, oh no, like that means like I'm going backwards, right? And it's like, no, because you're only ready to heal what you're ready to heal in that moment. So that thing that popped up 5 years later, you wouldn't have been able to heal that 5 years ago. It's popping up now because you're now ready to look at it in a much more holistic way than before. And so whenever people get like depressed or down on themselves on like, oh, I didn't do it right the first time, you did it perfectly the first time.
Yeah.
This is the journey you signed up for. And then, so the onion example, I think it's like you dig deeper as time goes on, and there's always going to be a little bit of a breadcrumb left, and eventually you'll grab it and you'll heal it. Uh, and then, of course, the Syrian Star Council emphasized what many, many people already look at is we have this toroidal spiral. Healing isn't linear. It's this like
Mhm.
coil. And so it's not directly straight up. It's not about moving up and healing, right? We talk about elevating frequency, but it's more nuanced. Sometimes you'll have a little dip because you got to address it and then you keep going upward. And so it's not a competition, but I know it's a very common conditioned way of thinking that we
Yeah.
think we gotta strive upwards and it's linear and one and done and all those things. Check the box, blah, blah.
Yeah. And that's why I think we're in like the great deep programming, because we start to realize that things aren't linear, that healing is nonlinear, that you're healing these layers. You're ready to heal one aspect of yourself, but not this yet. And
Mm.
I love it. Like, I'm not always happy to go through a dark night of a soul. I'm not like, okay, like rip
Who
my guts
is?
out, like let's do this. But I also know that it means I'm ready. I'm hitting an edge and I'm ready for another level. And so there's something that is just ready to go. And so I ride the wave. And I think the more that you can just let go of expectation, let go of trying to cling to, hey, it's funny. I'm being told to say happiness all the time. Like, stop clinging to an ideal or an idea and just let yourself go through what it needs to go through. You will expedite this process more than you could ever imagine. And I'll leave kind of close this conversation around something Alex and I were talking about, how we've been working with people and we see a lot of people right now who are still deeply in it, who are, what did you say? I wrote it down. Like, they're doing some heavy clearing and they're at like major decision points. And I was surprised because oftentimes I feel like Alex and I are like, yeah, I'm seeing this too, da da da. And I think Alex and I, when we were going through this deep, dark night of the soul that was incredibly painful, that we just like wrote it out. We didn't have any sort of expectations. We were just like seeing where the next day took us. And we were just like letting whatever wisdom this darkness needed to share with us to come through. And so I was checking in with you. I was like, how are you feeling? Like, are you fine? Like, I'm fine. I feel great. Like, I actually feel like I'm out of it. I feel like I'm
Mm.
awesome. Like, I'm having incredible things happen lately. But all these people around me, it feels like they're still deeply going through it. And and you and I were talking about like, because I kept soaking, like, what is happening? And I honestly think it's just the fact that we just like let ourselves be in the darkness. We let it happen. We rode the wave and we weren't trying to like fight the rip current, like so
Yeah.
many people do, because there's so much unknown in it, and now like you and I think sit in the unknown way more than we've ever done, nor have had the
Yes.
capability of doing that lately. So maybe that's why we were like, darkness, take me. Let's see where we're going. What do I have to learn?
Yeah, I think it's also, you and I have embarked on incredibly intense changes over the last 1 to 2 years,
Yeah.
and physical, emotional, all those things. And so I think we both were kind of expecting another dark night of the soul. Like we're just like that typically that's how it goes. Eventually it'll come. And I think when you've done a few of them, and spoiler for anyone who's going through their first one, there is always more than one. People think there's just one dark night of the soul. That's not how this works. And I think once you've done a few of them, you also come to feel more safe and I'm gonna be okay. I've done this a few times, and that's why I also want to emphasize we're not saying all this to be like, oh, we're ahead or whatever. That's not what this is. It's just sharing from experience, you're gonna be fine. And people that we're seeing right now who are still heavily clearing, we're excited for them because it means the next, big step in their life is right there. For me, I'm seeing people like heavily clearing and avoiding a decision that they knew has been coming for a while.
Yeah.
And so now it's like just because you're clearing something doesn't mean you can avoid a decision. Clearing things means you're approaching a decision and you need to start feeling empowered to make the decision to move forward. And I think that's what I'm kind of observing with people. So I'm going to speak it out into the YouTube ether of I'm excited for everyone because it means they're so close to the next thing in their life that's been called in by them over a long time. You've invited this, so be excited, even if it's something difficult.
I love that. Beautiful way to end our conversation today.
Yeah.
So thank you, all two of you, for joining. We appreciate you. Thanks for making it to the end. Give us a subscribe, and we'll see you soon on the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.